Hello there. What is going on, everybody? Today we are going to be talking about the number one problem with making tabletop games for Star Wars, and that is primarily due to it being a licensed product and has some unique challenges that certain unlicensed products do not have. We're going to be talking about 5 ways to deal with this particular issue, and I want to know if you guys agree with me. We are still doing a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. We're going to be announcing the winner for that giveaway at the end of this video. So if you've been subscribed and you've left comments, you're already entered, watch till the end of the video. We'll be announcing that one. If you don't win, don't worry, we do giveaways all the time. We're going to be doing Adepticon coverage later this week. There's going to be a lot of live streams. You want to like the video, subscribe, click that bell for alerts so you don't miss out on the latest and greatest, especially when these live streams come up. I'm not sure exactly what the schedule is going to look like over the course of the convention, so you won't want to miss on any surprise streams. There may be some awesome content, a lot of bonuses maybe. We'll have to wait and see. Plus, we'll be doing recaps and wrap-ups afterwards and more giveaways after the convention as well. And also some giveaways on Patreon, so patrons, look out for a little extra bonus stuff coming up soon also. So again, big thanks to patrons for continuing to support this channel. You guys are amazing. And if that's something you're interested in, check the links in the video description below. With all that said, let's go ahead and talk about the number one problem right now is that there's only so much principal recognizable stuff that you can make for a Star Wars tabletop game. And that really boils down to, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, stormtroopers, the things that people walking by are going to know. Now, hardcore Star Wars fans, they recognize everything. They know all of the bounty hunters. They know all of the Clone Wars characters. They know all of this stuff. But your typical Star Wars fan might not know who Zuckuss and Forlom are, for example, right? That is one of the most big problems that comes out of trying to make a Star Wars tabletop game. Also, that things have to go through licensing. We can't go and just make a Mara Jade expansion for a game without necessarily getting it approved through Lucasfilm, and they tend to approve things that are more recognizable, things that are more current, and things that promote existing Disney Star Wars products. So stuff from Star Wars Rebels is a little bit more likely to get approved than something from Shadows of the Empire, which, again, or other pre-Disney EU Legends things. Some of that Legends stuff is starting to come back into being more popularized and being addressed, especially with the Ahsoka series, doing a live-action Grand Admiral Thrawn, and also having Thrawn in Rebels was good because we're able to see, Thrawn start to creep in, but he's still not as recognizable as like Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader and Stormtroopers and Princess Leia and Han Solo, Chewbacca. The really big iconic things that sell Star Wars products. Not always able to get people to buy too many expansions. And most Star Wars tabletop games aren't a single box anymore. They tend to be expandable things where you gotta, hey, here's a core set and here's an expansion, every month, multiple expansions. That's how the model goes. They gotta be able to print money. The license isn't cheap, and you need to be able to make that money. And a single box, like in the good old days of Star Wars Rebellion that only had a single expansion after like a year or two, like those days are like long behind us. I mean, they were able to make really great games in a single box once upon a time, but that's not the way it kind of works with modern licensing. It has to be constantly expandable. By the way, I would love for a Star Wars Rebellion 2nd edition, but that's a whole separate product. So I'm going to talk about 5 different ways that they can kind of approach that, because this has happened multiple times. I'm going to go back to Fantasy Flight making Imperial Assault. They kind of started to run out of the recognizable things. Now, they didn't completely run out, and there were some other circumstances in the case of Imperial Assault, primarily with Hasbro having an exclusive license to make board games, and how this really was a board game that had miniatures games, but they tried to say it was a miniatures game, and then Hasbro was like, no, that doesn't fly. It's still a board game. That there was a whole bunch of behind the scenes stuff that happened with this, which ultimately led to Imperial Assault not being able to have any more stuff. And then for a while, it looked like they had worked it out and they were going to do more Imperial Assault stuff, and it just never happened. One day, all the details of that are going to come to life, and I think it will make an excellent video for those of us who remember by the time it comes around. But again, there's the cases of they run out of stuff to make, and then they're left to kind of do more and more obscure stuff. Again, the core set had so many iconic characters. You had your Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker in the core box, and and then you had like Leia and Han and Chewie and stuff were all kind of in that first year. And then you're at a certain point, you're just doing more and more obscure things. Not everybody is a super competitive player or a completionist. A lot of people are very casual fans and might not necessarily want to get everything. Star Wars Legion came out, and then of course, yeah, same thing. You have Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker in the box. You have like all of your core, most recognizable characters kind of very early on, and then you're left trying to kind of, all right, well, how are we going to get more recognizable stuff? And so there's 5 options on how they can kind of deal with this issue, and a lot of these are things that some of these games have already done. Some of these are things that FFG has done, things that AMG has done, and some of them are different suggestions. So option number 1 is duplicates. And what I mean by duplicates is kind of taking an iconic character and sort of duplicating it. And there's a couple of different ways they can do this. They can do it alternate versions, like having convention exclusive Darth Vaders, which they've done a couple of times. It's the same model, and it's just like a limited alternate way to do it. That one doesn't really make a whole lot of money because you're only making like 500 of them or 1,000 of them or something like that, and you have a very, very small quantity. That's just a way to kind of do something for the convention. In the cases of like places like Star Wars Celebration, they insisted like, hey, if you're going to be here and you can have a booth on the main floor, you have to have an exclusive thing for the people who are coming. So that's not necessarily like a big business thing. That's something to allow them to be at Star Wars Celebration and reach a lot of people. Another way of doing duplicates is the way that FFG first started with Legion was that they said, hey, you know what, let's do an alternate Vader and an alternate Luke. Let's make them operatives. And so it was a way for them to say, hey, we have Bespin Luke in the core set. Let's do Jedi Luke as separate and make him an operative. Let's do also a similar version of Darth Vader, make him an operative. And that works a little bit. That works great for the completionists, and it works great for the competitive players, the people that want a different version. The problem is that Darth Vader kind of always looks the same. It's not like Darth Vader wore like a white cloak in Return of the Jedi. No, he wears the same thing every time. So how many Darth Vaders can you make? There are a lot of players that are going to say, I already have Darth Vader. I don't need another Darth Vader. That is a real thing. It's obviously the tournament players who, if you play Empire, you're going to want every version of them. And the completionists are going to want every version. Or the hobbyists may say, I like that sculpt better. I want to buy that one also. But that's just a portion of your player base and your potential customers. Again, they're not only marketing to the competitive players or the completionists, they're also marketing to the casual fans of Star Wars who are going to be walking past and see something on the store shelf. Or they're also marketing towards other gamers that are going to be in a game store, and maybe they're board gamers or 40K players or that they just have a passing fancy with Star Wars, and that may look and say, oh, yeah, you know what? Those are pretty cool. So stuff like that. Again, duplicates don't always deal with that. Now, we are also seeing other games have the duplicates problem. And it's not necessarily a problem, but it's more of a way to deal with the ceiling problem. Star Wars Shatterpoint also has done a lot of duplicates. AMG has certainly done duplicates plenty of times. Marvel Crisis Protocol, another licensed product, also through Disney, although it's a different IP, has plenty of duplicates. They have multiple versions of Wolverine already, all with different costumes, outfits, and stats, and they're statistically different units, right? And they're doing this with multiple characters. Black Widow they did that one like very, very early. They did multiple versions of Black Widow right away. And again, that's one way to approach it, but I feel like you miss a lot of potential customers with that because a lot of people are going to say, I already have Black Widow. I don't want 2 Black Widows. I already have Darth Vader. How many Darth Vaders do you expect me to honestly buy? Some people will buy all of them. Some people will buy even 1 or 2, but not everybody's going to buy every Darth Vader. So again, it's one of those problems that they're going to have. Even other games that aren't miniatures games like Star Wars Unlimited, they're in. I think they're still in their first year. Maybe they're just starting year 2, but they're less than 2 years in, and they're doing duplicates. There's multiple ghosts. There's multiples of a lot of different characters, and you're seeing multiple Yodas, multiple a lot of duplicates, and of course they've built that way from the ground up. That's what they're planning on having. Duplicates, and with every set that comes out, you're going to probably see more and more duplicates happen. And I'm curious how long that can really keep going. If you go 5 years in, and that was the thing I did not like about Star Wars Destiny is just like how many Darth Vaders are we going to have now? How many of this character are we going to have now? How many of that character are we going to have now? It started to take a little bit of the allure off. It's okay to have duplicates once in a while, I think. But in a case where they're kind of planning for it to be duplicates from the very beginning, and in the before you're even halfway through your second year, you're already seeing multiple duplicates. It could be a thing. It's not something that I am super crazy about, but I understand the need because of there's only so many different unique and marketable characters. Again, there's lots of characters. You can go down the rabbit hole. That takes us to number 2. Going down the rabbit hole and getting more and more obscure releases for your Star Wars game. Star Wars X-Wing is one that I think kind of infamously did this. They went very obscure with a lot of releases. Some of these ships, like the Azatuk gunship, I had never even heard of before it was announced for Star Wars X-Wing. And so, and I'm curious if for any of you X-Wing players out there, were there any releases that came out that kind of took you by surprise? Like, I've never heard of that before. I know like some of the things were pulled from old PC games, from the old West End RPGs, and from obscure, some things were from books. They pulled, now this also was something that X-Wing could do a little bit more easily because they had this game before the Disney takeover. They had this one for the old Lucasfilm, which was a lot easier to approve Legends content, and it's a lot harder to get those things passed. Not impossible, but it's a lot more rare to see things from Legends show up in the game. This is also suffers from the problem of not everybody's going to know what these things are. As people walking by might see an Azatuk gunship and say, what is that? If that's the first thing they see from X-Wing, it might not catch their eye because it's not as recognizable. You're not going to pull as many new players into the game with a wave like this that has 3 ships that a lot of people aren't going to recognize. It's your X-Wings, your TIE Fighters, your Slave Ones, your Millennium Falcons. Those are the things that are going to pull people into a game like X-Wing. Again, you need those recognizable things. You need shelf appeal. You're asking retailers to put your product on their shelf, which is at a premium because there's so many new games coming out all the time. That when you get these really obscure releases, it's cool for the hardcore fans. It's cool for the competitive players. It's cool to have new things all the time because you're not getting duplicates. But at the same time, you're not appealing to as many new customers or casual fans of the game. There's a lot of kitchen table players that may say, you know what, I can skip this whole wave. There's absolutely nothing in there we need. That's certainly another option. And maybe it's an imperfect option, but that was something that has been done before. And it happens a little bit in other games too. Not just X-Wing, but I thought that was a good example of kind of going deep and going down the rabbit hole, maybe a little too far. Third option of dealing with this crisis is just launching a whole new edition for your game. X-Wing is also one that does this. Star Wars Legion is going through this right now. And it's definitely a risky way to approach that sort of the limit of shelf appeal, the limit of those iconic and recognizable units. Again, you don't just need everything to be good from a competitive standpoint. You also need things to have customer appeal. They need to be recognizable, they need to be marketable, and they need to be current. It needs to be things that are kind of meet all 3 of those. And the reason it needs to be current is because you have to get it through Lucasfilm. Things that are new are more likely to be recognized by people. It'd be hard to do something really, really old. Like a lot of us hardcore fans might know Mara Jade, but if they put like a Mara Jade on the shelf, it might be hard to sell. But if you can relaunch those core things, if you can relaunch your Luke Skywalker and his X-Wing in the core set of a new Star Wars X-Wing, and of course there's Darth Vader on the box, even though he's not inside the box. You got Darth Vader in his TIE Advanced sort of on the box there. If you got Luke and Vader in your core set, it's gonna sell to a lot. It's gonna reach a lot more people than if you had IG-88 and Zuckuss and Forlom on your core set. It's going to be a little bit more marketable to have the most recognizable characters, the most recognizable vehicles, the most recognizable ships, and that sort of stuff on your box. And a second edition is a way to kind of relaunch those recognizable, those principal characters. It's a way to do that and also bring out new sculpts and to fine-tune your things a little bit. But a second edition carries a whole lot of drama with it, as X-Wing sort of gave us, and that some people saw this as, well, shoot, I can't use my existing stuff anymore. I have to buy a conversion kit. Or in the case of Star Wars Legion, it was a whole new rule set that also rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, along with their refusal to call it a second edition in the first place, which was very, very weird. But the second edition is something that I think is a good idea for a game, but it carries so much risk and that people are going to be upset with it. Just because of the term second edition. Some people don't like the term edition. I personally think it's a good thing, but it's risky. It's a very risky business call. Again, Star Wars Legion is going through it right now. There's another risk in that doing a second edition is that how many people are going to buy it? How many of your existing customer base are going to buy it? Your hardcore players. If you're saying that they don't need to buy any of this stuff, their existing collection is good, how many of your established base will completely pass on all of it? Now, some of the stuff in the new reprints do look kind of cool. The new Stormtrooper models for Legion look like they could be great. The new Rebel Trooper models look like they could be really cool. But if I've already got 6 units of Stormtroopers, how many do I really need to get? Do I need to get any? The answer is no, I don't need to get any of them. Will I get at least one? Maybe. If I can find it in my budget to go pick up a Stormtrooper box when they come out, probably. But that's a big difference from the initial launch where I'm like, oh my gosh, these new Stormtroopers look really cool for Star Wars Legion when it first launched. And I'm like, I have to max out on Stormtroopers. If Legion did Gungans, I would probably have to max out on them. But if they're doing, reprints of the stuff that I already have, even though it's a second edition and it's a, fancy sculpt, I may not get any. And that's the problem. You may reach some new players, but you may lose your existing players with a second edition. So it's got some risks. Option number 4 is to just do an all new game, completely new game in a slightly different scale. So people have to buy the new stuff because you make it incompatible with everything else. This is also risky because it risks the lack of support for the previous game. There's been a couple of examples of Asmodee companies doing this, where we're going to look at, for example, X-Wing to Armada, whole new game, different scale. Actually, it worked very well because both games were able to thrive on their own. X-Wing continued to grow in popularity while Armada came and had its own following. The games were different enough, the gameplay was different enough that they were both able to thrive. But in the case of Imperial Assault, you had Star Wars Legion, which came out, which is just about 10% larger than Imperial Assault, such that you could not use them. You couldn't mix and match them. Although I will admit that in early playtesting of Star Wars Legion before it came out, I did use a lot of Imperial Assault models as placeholders. Even though the bases weren't quite there, it was close enough to kind of get the general feel of the game. However, that being said, you couldn't use them. You couldn't use them back and forth. And then, of course, once Legion came out, then Imperial Assault didn't last much longer after that. Now, that was not because of Legion. It was actually because of other things, but this certainly didn't do it any favors. Legion came out and did really well. Legion, actually, if it killed anything, it killed Rune Wars, which was another miniatures game that FFG had. Really good game, by the way. It's a shame it didn't get to grow and turn into something more. But so Legion came out. Now, then Shatterpoint gets announced, coming out by Atomic Mask, who also has Legion. And again, it's about 10% larger than Legion. There are larger models than you have with Star Wars Legion. Maybe 15% larger, maybe a little bit more than 10%. But again, if you look at Imperial Assault Stormtrooper, then you have Star Wars Legion Stormtrooper, and then you go to Star Wars Shatterpoint Stormtrooper. You see this gradual thing. Not the same scale, not the same miniatures. So just make a whole new game and have your iconic characters in there. And by the way, Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, while not in the core set of Shatterpoint, were also announced for the game before the core set came out. So again, any new game has to have Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader in it. You have to convince people they're going to need to buy a new Darth Vader and a new Luke Skywalker one way or another. It's just kind of the way that things have to happen, apparently, for Star Wars games. Again, they're the most recognizable. And, an all-new game is also risky because it means that you may have divided support. You're competing with yourself. It made a lot of people scratch their heads. Wait, if you're trying to keep Legion alive, why would you release Shatterpoint and compete with yourself? And there's reasons for that. If they were developed under different studios and they were already under development at the same time. But it certainly has had an impact. I feel like Legion has done really, really well, where Shatterpoint is very much struggling. But that's because of a lot of different reasons. The rule set is just being, a huge miss with a lot of people. Some folks love it, but most people, at least most of my viewers, tell me they can't stand the gameplay of Shatterpoint, and I have to agree with them. I initially thought it was interesting, but then after a couple of games, it felt very samey, and the lack of ability to kill anybody in Shatterpoint has made it feel like it wasn't really a Star Wars game at all, although it had pretty Star Wars miniatures, the gameplay wasn't there. And so I feel like that one's, I don't know how much longer that one's going to last. And so again, that's where it comes in the risk. When you make a whole nother game that's almost the same, kind of, there's only really room for one of them to kind of thrive most of the time. Somehow Games Workshop has done this, and they've got like multiple games all with the same universe, although a lot of times those have compatible miniatures. I think it's one of the cool things why Kill Team and 40K are both able to work at the same time, because they're not competing with each other as much as they are kind of feeding into each other. And I feel like maybe Shatterpoint would have done better if it was an alternate way to play with your Star Wars Legion models instead of having all new models. Maybe it would have been more successful that way, possibly. So that was option number 4. Option number 5 on how to deal with this limited amount of things in Star Wars, primary units. Option number 5 is my personal favorite, although it might not be everybody's personal favorite, and it's to simply have a slower release schedule. I'm going to cite Star Wars Armada in here, primarily because it's my favorite Star Wars game, my favorite tabletop game. But also, I think it's also been one of the most timeless games. Granted, I understand that Atomic Mass Games did kill it, but at the same time, Star Wars Armada had a slow release schedule. Capital ships have probably the least amount of depth in Star Wars out of all of the different arenas. You have a lot of dudes to do like dudes on a map, and I don't mean just males, so male and females, but like personnel. If you're doing a dudes on a map game, you're printing people that are moving around doing ground battles. You have a lot of those. You have fewer ground vehicles. But you have also a lot of starfighters. So X-Wing had a lot of stuff that they could do. But as far as capital ships, there weren't that many. The Empire's almost always shown Star Destroyers. And so they only had probably about like 10 different ships that they could choose from. But because they did slower releases and smaller releases, and they didn't try to do a release every month for Star Wars Armada, it was able to endure for years while still having new things. There was still plenty more that could have happened if FFG had kept the game. It would still be going strong today with several more waves still planned. So again, a slow release schedule keeps the game healthy, keeps the game getting new content about once a year without it burning out on that ceiling. The problem with this, though, is that you don't make as much money. You're not, again, if you're only releasing one new expansion wave a year, then maybe you're not generating enough profit. And so there's always a kind of a trade-off on, are we focused on making a great game that will last forever and that new players can join into without saying, oh man, I joined in 2 years late. Well, that's no problem. There's only like, 3 or 4 boxes you need to buy and then you're completely caught up. Versus, if you go a different route where we're having expansion releases every month. Oh, I just joined 2 years late. Okay, and that's no problem. It's going to cost you $1,500 to get caught up. You know what I mean? So a slower release schedule is better for the consumer as far as their wallets, but it's worse for the corporate profit level. So you want to have great gameplay or do you want to have great profits? And it's hard to do both at the same time. So I like option 5 of a slower release schedule. I think it makes it more manageable. I think it makes it easier because you can still focus on reprints. It's probably easier to get new players into the game as long as your gameplay is solid with a slower release schedule as well. And it allows you to also diversify and to work on other games in the meantime instead of having to do a new ship every month or a new expansion every month. So those are 5 ways to deal with the problems of having limited recognizable core units for Star Wars games. It's also time to announce the winner for the $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. Today's winner is going to be Einar86. Congratulations, Einar86. Go ahead and shoot me an email at mailcrabbok@gmail.com and we'll get your information squared away. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with, what your thoughts are down in the comments section below. That's going to do it for today's video. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are amazing and out of this world and help make this whole channel possible. Thank you so much. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes, and always wash your socks.